Good afternoon and good evening, and thank you all for joining us. Staying sane in a remote world, in a post-COVID-19 world, when does that world begin? Well, it's different for just about every country. I think we're all become accustomed to this daily drone of updates from across the globe, flattening the curve, the length of the lockdown, the testing, and so on. So what do we know? We know that work, as we lived it, will likely not be the same again, or at least not for a very long time. We know that the remote setup that much of the tech world was thrown into as a result of the corona crisis may not be all that temporary. Google and Facebook announced recently that their teams are not returning to physical buildings until at least 2021. Some people woke up to this headline in the New York Times. Twitter could end the office as we know it. We also know that some of the best minds are figuring out the meaning and the design of our future work world. Tonight's discussion is a classic one for Jerusalem where tech meets design. We take a big hairy topic or a sector and try to tease out what does happen when design meets a big tech challenge. Although we're meeting remotely tonight, our events of the last 3 years have been hosted in some of Jerusalem's most iconic spaces: the Israel Museum, Cinematheque, Biohouse, and Hansen House. We believe that Jerusalem is a city with unique resources in both the tech and design space that make it an ideal venue for these conversations. Tonight, to help us tackle this big hairy topic, we are joined by one of the serial Israeli tech icons, Amir Schwartz. Amir is currently, hi Amir. Amir is currently based in Palo Alto, and he is has a lot of experience as a C-level executive, entrepreneur, and angel investor. He's held senior positions at Amazon's Twitch, Slack, Google, and Microsoft. Today, he's the chief product officer and co-founder at Reshuffle, where he helps companies create better workflows and integrations. Amir has authored 2 books on design. One is Designing Bots, and one is Designing Web APIs. So, Amir, it's great to have you
with us. Thank you for having me. Yeah, very excited to be here. Thank you, Wendy.
Glad you can join us across some number of time zones.
Exactly.
I wanted to start by throwing out some pretty broad points that you made recently in a Facebook post. You posited that remote work is here to stay. Companies will adjust to managing remote teams. Corporate travel will never be the same. Companies will understand that you can do a lot more without the expense of travel. And you also said that salaries will change as the workforce decentralizes. And I thought you threw out some interesting data points that software engineer in the Valley can be $500,000 a year, and in Thailand, $35,000 a year. So that's a pretty big gap. So my first question, Amir, is how vast is this remote work trend? Is this just a 2020 story, or are we about to see the whole tech world or the white collar world writ large going remote?
So I think this is a wide trend, and I think this is going to stay for a very long time. I actually had a conversation with my wife where I said, I think it's going to be as big as the internet, where the internet changed our life in a fundamental way. I think remote work is going to change the way we live and the way we work in a similar way. If you think about it, just in the Silicon Valley in the last 3 months, we've been working remotely. Everybody has been working remotely because we have been doing this under the shelter in place rule for the last 10 weeks. So every manager has now become a remote manager. Every worker has become a remote worker. And now the big companies are announcing that this is going to be here for a duration. So Twitter said no more, everything's going to be remote work. And then Facebook followed up. I have friends in Facebook who have hired only for the Bay Area, who now hire for anywhere in the US, and they predict that it's going to be anywhere in the world for their next role. So I think there's going to be major changes, and it's going to affect not just the way we do work, but the way we design software and design processes and design our business to work with this new reality.
All right, so you're saying it's with us for quite some time. So I'm going to actually then push you with what are the upsides and the downsides of working remotely? I know, on the one hand, the big tech companies have worked for years on having these elaborate physical office spaces. You have the greenhouses and the tree houses, the swimming pools, and everything one can imagine from Steve Jobs' time of big open spaces that encourage, serendipitous engagement. But I would say on the upside, there's geographic flexibility that can come from remote work, which is what you referred to. So give us sort of a upside downside evaluation.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying about like the way the office change has dramatically impacted our life. When I was when my kid was asked, "What does Dad do in Google?" He said, "Dad slides," because we had a big slide at the office, so it was fun. That's what Dad does all the time. He slides on the slide. That's probably not gonna happen. I think we're gonna see.
Unless you build a slide in your living room, yeah.
Unless I guess he's gonna pitch that for sure. So I guess we're gonna see a few positive trends and a few challenges. I think the challenges comes from like thinking about from a design perspective. What are the things that people do today that are really helping them to work and be productive when they work together? Things like people feeling belonging. And how do we transform that? How do we design systems and processes to make people feel like they belong to a group? People share ideas and information, right? As you said, the serendipity of meeting someone for coffee and just coming up with a solution for a problem I had. People help each other, which is important because that's the way we do work. So how do we change? How do we create the flows and processes and maybe software that will help us do all these things? An example would be like, do we create ceremony of thank God it's Friday? Like in Google, we had every week we had TGIF, and we synchronized and told people what we did this week and what we're going to do next week. So what are the flows? On the positive side, I think there's going to be a very interesting change in the company's culture. You know how you have a meeting where the loudest person wins the conversation because they're super loud or they're friends, they're office politics? I think there's an opportunity here once we go remote to change this, to give people with disabilities the ability to come into the office, right? That's super important. When people think about diversity, they don't think about social diversity. For example, a person from a rural area could join a tech company in a big city. A person who has different opinions, a person who has limitations of leaving their home. All of this is going to change and hopefully create a more diverse and open type of conversation in the business.
That's pretty dramatic. If you think about it, suddenly when you want to hire, your eligible talent pool is not just the country, but the world, is what you're saying.
100%. I can tell you that we've closed our physical office. We actually closed both the office in Silicon Valley and in Tel Aviv and went 100% remote. I interviewed people. The data I gave was actually I interviewed people in Thailand. I interviewed people in New Zealand. I interviewed people from all over the world. And you see that there's, of course, amazing people all over, but the cost of living is very different. So the incentives that companies going to have is to hire more remotely. because you don't have to pay the salary of the Silicon Valley if you have amazing people anywhere, and there's no meaning for being in the same office, right?
Well, actually, you're bringing up a whole other topic, which is the diversity on teams, which I know is the holy
Yes.
grail for Silicon Valley tech companies.
It is very, very important. And I think it's not just diversity on, it is diversity on gender, it's diversity on race, it's diversity on religion, but it's also diversity on age, it's diversity on people who have big families or don't have big families, it's diversity on location, it's even diversity on political views, right? California is super blue, and it could be that we're going to have people from other places around the world who have different opinions. And that's going to be, I think, delightful, because I think that from diversity, there's a business merit to diversity, which is you're going to have representation of different people, and you don't have the ivory tower syndrome, which we really suffer both in tech in Israel and tech in the Silicon Valley, which is we think everybody else is like us. And our biggest problem is that the drone didn't drop the package from Amazon in our front yard fast enough. That's not the biggest problem for the rest of the world. So having more people from more places around the world, it's going to be, is going to change the way we design software, I think, and design solutions.
Right. Like I said, that's just from a Silicon Valley perspective, it's mind expanding when you think about it. So.
Exactly.
Okay, so there's of course an actual design component to the notion of the remote work story. I'm curious, how would you tackle the question of how do we design a company and teams that work remotely? Or maybe to be more specific, what is the look and feel of some of the most critical technologies that we'll be leaning on if we move to a remote world? I know you worked at Slack for some time and now Reshuffle,
Yeah.
so curious to your perspective.
So I think we're going to use a lot more tools like Zoom, like Slack, and thank you for mentioning, I worked there. Everybody use Slack. I think it's awesome. I think we're going to see more usage of tools and more asynchronous communication. I think if I think about the design of software, we used to do a lot of synchronous work. For example, when we hire someone, we used to meet together in a room, talk about the role, talk about the capabilities, distribute the questions, and then go and do the interviews. Now it's going to be totally different. You're going to have people in different time zones, so you can meet in the same time, right? You're going to have people with different views on what the candidate needs, so you need more syncing and more communication. So I think there's going to be emphasis on the things that are difficult in remote work, like synchronous or asynchronous. When I was at Microsoft, I managed 18 people in 7 different time zones. So we couldn't meet in the same time. So how can we design software that enables us to have asynchronous communication and to enable more communication? Because I think the key here across all, and you will hear from Monday, which is again about communication, is how do we over communicate? Because when we're remote, it's much harder to disseminate information. So I think one of the biggest trends is that we're gonna see more design choices when we design a company, when we do performance, when we hire, around communication, thoughtful communication, and more directed communication.
Okay, so really, it sounds like everything's up for grabs. I mean, based on what you just said about dealing with all those time zones, the notion of a workday, of well, whatever sense of a workday there is in the tech world, that's gone. It sounds like we just really have to let go of a lot of our preconceived notions.
Everything is going to change.
Yeah. All right. So you have this years of experience working for some of these big tech giants, and many of them are facilitating remote and distributed teamwork. How have you seen work norms evolve throughout the years? And what do you think these work norms are going to look like moving forward?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. when I was in Israel and I worked at in Microsoft, my manager was in Dubai. I couldn't even call him because there wasn't any line between Israel and Dubai. There was no relationship at the time, and I think we had to call Zurich together. We had to call a certain phone in Zurich in order to us to have a conversation. And I was sure the Mossad had like a file on me for talking to Dubai through Zurich. So we've definitely changed.
Specifically, I'm sure. Yeah.
Exactly. So we're definitely moved a long way from there. I think we're going to see more smaller teams that work together well. If you at Amazon, we used to have a notion. We have a notion of the pizza team. So a size of a team that can go into a room and finish a single pizza. So that's between like 6 and 10 people. Smaller teams perform well in distributed environments. Once you have a bigger team, it's much harder to synchronize 150 people than it is to synchronize 8 people. So I think a big trend is going to be small tribal teams that work together really well, that know each other well, maybe in the same time zone, working on a portion of the workload, and then managers looking at multiple of these teams and synchronizing them. So we're going to see a change in the way we do work, in the size of the team, in the synchronization of the team. Thinking about culture is super important. At Google, I had a manager from India who managed two Israelis. And the cultural differences were really interesting because in India, the manager tells you everything. You have to do this, and you immediately do it. In Israel, your manager tells you something, and you immediately do the opposite. As an Israeli,
why do I need to do that? I'm really supposed to be doing this.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so how do you compensate for deep cultural changes that are going to happen? So I think companies, big companies, know how to do that. And one of the things that I've been thinking about is how do we take this knowledge from big companies and bestow it to everyone else, because that's what they've been doing that for a very long time.
So you mean when you say bestow it on everyone else, do you mean more in the startup world?
Startup world,
or other
I think
parts of the economy?
Everything. For example, I'll give you an example. Sales. Today we're talking about flying salespeople, right? In order to do a sale, you go and you pitch and you take the clients for drinks afterwards. That's not going to happen anymore, I think. Not in the foreseeable future. With the cost of flights going to be much higher, you're going to have 6 hours of wait in the airport. Nobody's going to do that. So sales is changing to be over Zoom. How do you do that? And it's not just tech. It could be, how do you sell a car? How do you sell an experience? How do you sell all these things? So I think there's multiple industries that are going to be radically changed by the move to the online trend. If you look at e-commerce, for example, somebody published a story that said that we've doubled the use of e-commerce in the last 3 months. We doubled it 10 years before that. So there's different, and that's just in commerce, right? So we're going to see major radical changes happening moving forward.
I'm listening to you and I'm just remembering the movie of the Dolly Parton movie of many, many years ago, 9 to 5. What a way to make a living. It's just gone.
That's not going to happen.
Let me ask you this, just before we're going to start to wrap up here. So when we put on these events in Jerusalem on Where Tech Meets Design, as I said before, we're always creating this nexus point or this conversation between the tech voice and the design voice. Since you really have a foot in both worlds, in Silicon Valley and in Tel Aviv, can you comment on, when you think about the future of work, do you feel like the tech and the design teams are at it together? Are they in a tussle? Are they, what's the dynamic there?
I think they have to work together. I think software as we use it together will not work for the challenges ahead. I think design will have to change, and I think we need to think about our users in a different way. I think we need to think about our peers in a different way. and designing our organization in a different way. I think if we continue using our own software that we're using today, it's like using clubs and hammers to build software. We need to design different tools. We need to design different software, and we need to design different processes. If we did, for example, if we used to do user research interviews to define the design of our software, and we used to bring people into the office and look and interview them, now we need to do that in remote. All the interviews that we've done up until now are kind of useless because the reality has changed. So we need to do a new set of interviews. And I think if we don't collaborate, we're going to provide a much lesser pieces of software and product. And so I'm hoping for a better future where design works with tech in a much stronger way.
Mm-hmm. Okay. No, this is sort of our ultimate value proposition in terms of the equation here. And of course, there's a whole issue of when does the design team get integrated into the process when a technology is being built. That's another
ideation. There's one answer. I've done this in multiple places. The worst is the way that where a PM goes to the designer and say, "Hey, this is what I've built. Make it beautiful." Right. This is worse. This is like and it's very common, unfortunately. The best I've seen it is actually in Slack, where product engineering and design work together from the ideation stage. Mm-hmm. So very important to loop in everybody.
Right. That's our big thesis. So I'm going to close. I'm going to just throw out a crystal ball question. Pretend that you're invited back to join us on a remote Tech Meets Design event 5 years from now. What is the work world? You can either take it, what does the work world look like, or what does the work day look like?
Okay.
Just compare it to today.
Okay. I'm much better at predicting the past, by the way.
Oh,
than predicting
that's really
the future.
Talented.
Yeah. So I think we're going to see things. So I think remote we're going to change the definition of remote. I think we're going to move from remote to work. Remote implies that there's a center. I don't think we're going to have a center anymore. That's the radical thought I'm trying to tell people. I think we're going to move into no HQ or to 1,000 HQs. So we're going to move from a center place, whether it's the Silicon Valley or Seattle or New York or Tel Aviv, into multiple places, super distributed. I think we're going to see more rural tech. So people sitting in Kopangan and coding and enjoying life. Stay-at-home moms who code at home.
Sounds like a group.
Yeah. And it is a group. It is creating a feeling of belonging. So when you meet each other for an on-site once a year, you feel like you know everybody because you've been with them on the tools and services that you love. So I think that we're gonna battle loneliness, which we all feel today with COVID, and we're gonna define a new togetherness, and it is going to require stronger design thought and stronger product leadership, I think. And last but not least, I think we're going to see a lot of more nomadic work. So I've seen some of my friends just left and started roaming the world because they don't want to be in this expensive Silicon Valley at home, and they've enjoyed it tremendously. I haven't seen a single person who started this nomadic journey who has said that they're going back to staying at home. So hopefully we're going to be around the world traveling and working.
Okay, so Amir, I feel like this conversation has left my head somewhat spinning. You're telling me there's no real work day, there's no headquarters, there's no geographic location. It sounds like everything is up for grabs. I do want to thank you for joining us and taking time out of your day. We appreciate it. It's been rich. I am going to ask you to stick around because after our next speaker is done, we'd like to take questions from our remote audience. And I am going to invite anyone in the audience. Thank you. Very welcome. Anyone that is with us, you can submit your questions to Amir or to Rotem, our next speaker, on chat, and then those questions are being sent to me, and we will make sure to get in as many as we can. So thank you. Now I am going to introduce Rotem Weissman, who is the head of design at Monday.com. Monday.com is a company that powers remote teamwork. She leads a team of over 30 designers specializing in UX and UI, brand design, and marketing. Rotem joined Monday as a startup 7 years ago. I think she was employee number 6. And now there's over 400 employees at Monday both in Israel and the US. Rotem, before I invite you to share your thoughts, I want to just throw out a quote from your website. The quote is, "With Monday.com, we're able to work in a way that suits our needs while still keeping remote teams closely aligned and highly empowered." So that quote, again, from your website, is obviously from a very satisfied C-level client of Monday. I mean, that's what Monday does. You allow teams to reimagine how they work in order to achieve the highest standard of execution. In many ways, I would argue that your company was born for this moment. We're glad that you were able to join us tonight and represent the design voice in this conversation. We're hoping you can share your design perspective on what it means for companies to adapt to this dramatic new reality. So actually, Amir, I think you can do stop video for about the next 10 minutes, and we'll invite Rotem on. There we go. Welcome. Glad to have you with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was so interesting listening to your talk right now. So yeah, I'll share my screen and let's start. Great. Can you see my screen? Is it shared?
Yes.
Wonderful.
Perfect.
So yes, so thank you for inviting me. And I want to talk about one of my most passionate agendas that I strongly believe in, and it's related to everything you just talked about. And it's that in order for companies to succeed and reach their business goals, everyone in the company needs to become a designer. And design, it's a joint effort. It's not just for designers. And as you mentioned, I learned that when I joined Monday about 7 years ago, and it was a very small startup. And since I was the only designer in the company, so my design team was everyone around me. And I was fortunate to work with people that understood and thought design and took this road with me. And I really believe that my work as a designer got much better thanks to their input and their work with me. And what I really want people to take from this talk is that if they're not designers, to start thinking design and want to become a designer in their company. And if they are designers, what I would really love them to do is to start including everyone into their design processes. But for that, let's start with how companies work these days. So companies are have a fast pace than ever before. And I think that this is an assumption that everybody can agree on. And we can just saw it now and according to your talk as well, that the time of the COVID, it just proved us that companies who managed to adapt quickly to the situation, if it's to change their product, if it's marketing differently, if it's PR, if it's working from home or working remotely, managed to survive this really, really difficult times. And the world is changing always dramatically, and we don't know what's going to come next. And this is why companies have to adjust to the world. And if we'll take a look back into the past, like 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if somebody wanted to install a software, they needed to go to a shop and buy a box And in that box, there was CDs, and then go home, put the CDs in the computer, and download and install the software. But today, if we look at Monday, for example, when we're doing about 30 software updates a day. That's insane. That's like 10,000 times faster. So the world is moving really fast. And if we look at it from the customer side, so in the past, the company had time to digest and react to what the customer needs or to their feedback. And also they used to pick up the phone, call the support, and then it used to go up in the chain to the management, and then go slowly down back to changes and back to the clients. But today, the company and the decision-making people are usually the last one to know what's going on. Client could just write everything on Twitter, on Facebook, whatever they need, and their voice today can be heard as a group. Their perspective is really, really strong and impact everything. And if we also look at it at the competitive landscape, so today, especially for SaaS companies and software, the competition is vast, and the market is insane. Here you can see an example of all those small dots that you can see, the small spots are logos of companies that provide tools for marketing teams. This is all in the same market fit. This is the competition. So a customer, a user can just switch to another company if it doesn't fit their needs. And that created a world that puts the customer needs at the center. A product is one holistic experience, from the sales to the advertising, to the customer support, to the product itself. The company have a liability and responsibility to give a real value to their customers. And not only value, it's the point of view of the company, it's their agenda, it's how they react to what's going on in the world. The customer's opinion on the company and on the product is crucial for their use. And that forces company to change the pace of the reaction. If in the past they used to do top to bottom organization and decision making, and that was based on authority rather than competence, and that created silos, and like each department used to do what they need in their scope, and that created a slow pace of reaction and movement and progress. And companies realize that they need to move to organization that is distributed, and the decision making should go to the employees themselves. They need to make the decision. They need to be able to react according to the customers, to the surrounding, to the situation. Basically, companies realize that instead of telling their employees what to do, they need to tell them where to go. They need to tell them the business objectives. They need to tell them the strategy, the metrics. They need to show them the way and not tell them exactly what to do, and let the people who work on it to be the ones who makes all the decisions. And when companies change the way they work and look at the customer as the main strategy, the design role needed to change accordingly and to adopt all that world into their work. And let's look why. So first of all, when the user is at the center of the business strategy, it means that the user experience is the tool to reach business goals. It empowers the designers to understand the business metrics and strategy and to mold the product into wins and growth. But it also means that everything that we do and everybody needs to be part of it. It means that the company needs to understand how to create a good user experience. It means that the principles of user experience, the principles of what we do, everybody should understand them and talk them, no matter if it's the CEO, it's the product managers, it's the developers, it's the marketing people. Everybody in the company needs to understand what it means to do a user experience and what it means to do a good user experience. And if we said that everyone in the company needs to be able to make decisions and move fast while keeping the product holistic and the value in the standards of the business, it also means that the design should be in any core processes in the company. For example, in Monday, the designers take part in every aspect of the company, but it also means that we involve everybody around us in our processes. Because to create rapid and impactful designs, everyone in the company needs to think design. So how exactly do we do that in Monday? And we work, well, basically we work around 5 main principles that the design team practice all the time. The first one is to share design knowledge with everyone. It's to share the basics of design. And what do I mean when I'm saying the basics of design? It's how to tell a story. It's how to make information accessible. It's leading the user into a fluid user experience flow. It's hierarchies, it's contrasts, it's the things that makes design. It's everything that we do as a designer on our daily basis. And these things are really important for everyone to do and to practice, because that's what makes the user experience so good. And if it's somebody is doing a banner or an email or a presentation, everything is based on those principles. And that's what we do in Monday. When every person who comes into a new employee who joined Monday, we as the design team, we sit with them, we show them our design principles, we go through with them on how to create a good design, the values of it, the principles. We created a shared language inside of Monday so everybody can understand what we're talking about when we're saying those values or those principles that we're talking about them all the time. The second principle is to think infrastructure. When we plan a feature, we need to think about its future, how it's going to evolve, and how to build it as a real infrastructure for the future teams that will work on those areas or will want to add a new feature or to change something. They will be able to do that without redesigning everything from scratch. And here you can see a good example for it. The tool of Monday used to be a table, just one table. And we wanted to show the content of the table in a different view. And what we did with that is we had like an idea for 2 or 3 different views. And instead of just creating them, we created a store for more views to come in the future. So no matter what people will invent or new ideas, they can just implement it there without us doing, again, a redesign all over again. And that's what created the ability to move faster with new ideas and to check them out and to evolve our product. The third principle is how to make an inclusive process. We need to include everyone in the process. We need to let people see our processes while we work on it and be part of the feedback and thinking. Asking for non-designers' input on our thoughts and processes will make our solutions so much better and will lead us to understand the problem world into a more depth understanding. It will make our design a million times better. And when we are working on Figma is a design tool that we use. It's a SaaS tool that everybody can join and see what we are doing. And really, everybody in the company are working with Figma, from the CEO who owns an account, to the product managers, to the marketing people, to the developers. Everybody can use Figma and work with it. And we find it that it's very empowering everybody around us, because they can see what we do, they can give their input. Imagine it's like a Google Drive, Google Doc, that everybody can put their own thoughts and to give their own take. They like to duplicate what we do and try to find their own take on it. And to empower them even more, what we did is we put all the UI elements in Figma, so everybody can just take them and build their own flows. So if a developer or a product manager wants to show their own idea, they can just take it, use it the way they want, and without using us in the way. For us, it's clearing the way to focus on what's important for us and our our visions and our work. And for them, it's enabling them to move faster and to just show their ideas, put it on the table. And that's also referring to the next principle, which is stop being a bottleneck. We really don't want to be a bottleneck on one hand, but on the other hand, we want to not compromise on the quality of what we do. So the solution we found is that we create a lot of templates for other non-designers teams. For example, here you can see a template of our blog covers photos. So the marketing team, when they create and write new posts, they can just go inside Figma, replace the picture that they want. They can launch as many posts that they want on the blog. And if it's a repetitive work, we don't want to do it. So they can do it, they can move fast, and we can focus on bigger and more important things for us to focus on. The last one is to speak impact and learn from others. And it's not enough that people will talk and think design. We, the designers, need to think business, metrics, data. We need to learn and improve our designs for the users. And I think that if we can learn from others and they can learn from us, that's what creates, that's the only way to create an amazing product. And what we do is we do a lot of user testing, and we show to the company how real users feel when they try our product. And we learn from our customer success. We take their input from talking to the clients, the NPS, the Net Promoter Score that the CS is using to predict user satisfaction. We take those, their takes. We learn from each other, and that's what helps us to create an in-depth solution for our clients. And I think that this is the most important thing for a team to do, because the ultimate UX can only be achieved when everybody in the company takes part in it and learn from each other and work together. And if something that I said just resonate with you and you would like to dive even more, then you can listen to our podcast, Startup for Startup, which is a podcast that we do here at Monday. It's use cases from the employees, their thoughts, what they learned. It's in Hebrew. And another suggestion is a blog that I like to read and I like to get my inspiration from. It's a great blog to read. I never wrote there, and they didn't pay me or anything else. They're just great resource. So thank you very much for your time. And back to you, Wendy.
Thank you, Rotem. That was really mind expanding. I have to say that, we talk and theorize so much about design, but it really does sound like the entire company of Monday is putting such a premium on design at the very core. Really interesting. All right, I'm going to invite Amir to join us so that we have the two of you together
here
on the screen. And I want to remind our audience, we have now a few minutes for questions. So feel free to send them in chat and they will get sent to me. I'm going to start, Amir, with you. What, in your opinion, are the most important skills that will be required from workers to succeed in this change world of work? How will they be taught or acquired?
Oh, this is a great question. I think the first skill is going to be communication skill. Just like Rotem did an amazing presentation and got us through an amazing set of knowledge. So I think it used to be super important to have communication skill. I think it's gonna be critical to have strong communication skills, because you're not gonna have the meeting by the coffee or the water fountain to just discuss things. You need to be very thoughtful and mindful and proficient at written communication and asynchronous communication. Second skill is self-management. I think the key here is, how do I manage my own time? How do I manage between work and life now that I don't go to work and come back from work? So how do I do work-life balance? It's no longer the company's mission to do work-life balance, it's your mission to do work-life balance. And I think managing performance and onboarding is super important and critical. This ties into like, how do we teach and acquire these skills? So how do you think about how do you onboard a new person to a new team? I've been talking to VCs that are now starting to think about how do they do investment in remote? How do they get to know the founder?
Right.
The same thing applies for teams. Like, how do you get to know a new team member? I just hired a new team member that I've never met. He's 7 hours time difference from me, in a totally different age range. And we get together amazingly well because we built the processes that enables that.
Wow, that's amazing. Because in Israel, we keep saying that the VC investment, there's a concern now about when all the VC funding from abroad is going to return. And the classic answer is, tell me when the skies reopen and when the VCs can come here and meet these teams face to face. And you're turning that on its head.
No, I'm seeing VCs here. I talked to a major VC here who made their first investment in a company without meeting ever the founders in person.
Yeah.
And
Rotem, I want to actually see if you'd like to take that question in terms of from where you're sitting, what do you think are the skill sets that will be required?
I agree with what Amir said. I think the communication skill is required there. I do think it's hard for me to say say exactly what's gonna be and what people will need to in order to do that, because I think that we don't really know exactly how it's gonna show. The times here, I'm a bit sidetracking it, but the time right now is not. We can't see exactly how remote work really work because it's constrained all of us in our houses with the kids and with everything. So I think that we didn't really felt how remote work will take over completely. Yeah. But we'll need to change. We will need to change the way we give one another time and patience, and we will lose all the small talks, the hallway talks and
the serendipitous engagement. Yeah, that's the big thing.
And that's something that we will need to inquire as we learn how to do that remotely. And that's something that I don't know how we're gonna do.
Rotem, I'm going to stay with you for another one, and it's a bit of a pivot, but we have a question here from the audience. What kind of new tools did Monday develop during COVID? Did you need to change your design?
Yeah, we did. We did a lot, actually. So first of all, we went straight away into research to understand what our users' needs and how their life changed as they work from home. Because we are a work platform, we are a work operating system for people. We needed to understand what it means for them, what's their struggle. And how they're gonna cope with it. It's not just how do I do a Zoom talks with one another. It's the fears. It's how they gonna how they seeing their future. So we went to research. We talked with many people from all sizes of teams, and we realized that we want to help people to do those small communication between one another. We were working a lot on creating that, on for people to do the asynchronous communication that you talked about earlier, in helping people to give their teammates recognition. We added a lot of small gestures for people to say, "Oh, amazing! You did that. You finished this task. Good for you." A lot of auto replies that are encouraging other teammates to be more empowered. We try to figure out how we can help people to do those small communication between one another. We also implemented tools like Zoom, so people can do that easier and more video chats. And we also added more tools to get better reporting of what's going on, because people started to feel like they need to know even more what's going on with their teams, who's doing what. Like managers, not the team members, the managers felt like they don't know what's going on around them, and they need to get more control not control in a bad way, like just to understand what's going on.
Right.
So trying to help them get more reports on that.
So actually, you just did a perfect segue to the next question, which is it's a little bit of a tricky one. Amir, I'm going to throw this one to you, especially in light of what you were talking about. Should we get used to being monitored by our employers?
I love tricky questions. Just to strengthen Rotem's point, I think empathy and knowing what's happening in your business is super important. Two skills that we should have, like a lot more empathy towards our peers and our managers and our reports, and more visibility, more tools for visibilities. So the sinister question, my sinister answer for like, will we be monitored is, do you think you haven't been monitored until now? I don't think that things will change from that perspective. I think managers will want to have more visibility towards what's happening, because right now when you're in remote work, things seem more opaque. Even if they're not necessarily more opaque, they seem more opaque. I don't meet Bill to ask him if he's finished a job. I can't use my usual guilt to get my team to do things on time. I can't like give them the evil eye if they talk bad or something like that. So I think
you can give them the evil email, but not the evil eye.
Exactly, which is totally different, right? Because it's a different way of communicating. And there was a study that showed that a vast majority of people didn't understand the tone of an email sent to them, right? Wow. Because they got one email and they thought it was an angry email, where it's actually not an angry email. So I think companies are going to use different ways to monitor us. I think performance review is going to radically change. So for example, Facebook and Google canceled this cycle of performance. They just said, hey, we don't know how to do this type of performance. We're not set up. This is COVID. People are very stressed about their performance. We're going to cancel performance. So, and now I think they're going to rethink performance. Performance review at Google used to be meeting in a hotel and calibrating people and seeing how and you can't do that anymore.
Right.
So we're going to have different ways of monitoring people rather than increased monitoring.
And what about micromanagement? That's another question that just came in that's pretty relevant.
Yeah. I think management in general is going to change. I hope micromanagement will go away because I don't like micromanagement. I'm too lazy for micromanagement. I think we're going to see more self-discipline. It's going to require a lot of skills from the other person. And we're going to see less micromanagement if we have better management skills. For example, what we use both in Monday and in Slack is a flag report. Every day at the end of the day, we say, here are the 3 things that I worked on, and they're green, yellow, or red. Green means done, yellow means in progress, I might have some problems, and red is I need someone's help. So these are like processes that we're going to start developing in order to prevent micromanagement, because there's a lot of fear with new managers, like how do I manage people who are not in the same room as I am?
All right. Wow. Okay. So let's hope. Let's just hope. Rotem, I'm going to close with a question for you. We just have like time for a 1-minute answer. So I'm going to give you a big question with a 1-minute answer. Do you think that the role of designers will be impacted by working remotely?
Yes, but I think it's everyone. It's not just the designers. This is exactly the talk that I did. I think it's everyone will have to be more transparent and to be more open and to be more inclusive, so people can work together and understand the processes, instead of working by myself for 2 weeks and then showing someone what I did and then get a lot of rejected and going back and forth. The iteration needs to be together all the time, and people will need to learn how to be more transparent and more and more open about the processes, and that will create, as I said, everybody needs to design together, and that's what's gonna create a good remote relationship. And it's also reference to the last question, that monitoring is not necessarily checking out what everybody is doing, Big Brother. It's the opposite. It's to share. It's transparency. Let's see what everybody is doing and work on it together.
Positive, very nice positive note to end on. I like that. So I want to thank both of you for joining us. I have to say, I think the thread that ran through both of the conversations with you was really innovation by necessity, which is a very Israeli story when you think about it. So each one of you in your own way managed to get that across. So thank you for forcing us to, or inviting us to reimagine the future of work. I think this is really the beginning of a big conversation that we're going to be engaging in for quite some time. So we appreciate your being with us. I just want to put in a very brief plug for the next two events that are going to be coming up on Tech Meets Design as we went remote. One of them is the Future of Human Interaction, which will be a week from tonight, 7:30 p.m. Israel time, 12:30 Eastern. And note that we have an excellent speaker lineup, including Mayan from TikTok. And then a week after that, so 2 weeks from tonight, we're going to tackle the future of health. And again, keep in mind that every time we come at these big, hairy topics, we're doing it from the perspective of that nexus point between tech and design. I also just want to take a minute to thank our partners. You are the best thought partners and the best partners in every way that we could imagine. These events and all the thought and the content building that went into them don't just happen. So first of all, the partners, Jerusalem Development Authority, the Ministry for Jerusalem, Betzalel School of Art and Design, JLM Impact, the New Spirit, and of course the Azrieli School of Engineering. We really appreciate everything that we're able to do on the collaboration front. And to my colleagues at Startup Nation, Netta Gruber, who's our head of content, please feel free to be in touch with her. Her email is here if you have any questions or suggestions. And Inbal Gottesman, just a huge thank you for everything that you do to pull this off. And of course to our colleagues on the tech and production side. Many thanks. Have a good evening or have a good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. We hope to see you soon next Tuesday night.